I never thought I'd be brave enough to attend my ex's wedding. Standing in that church, watching him marry someone else, I felt invisible. But then the doors burst open. My husband walked in. The same man nobody believed existed. The gasps that followed changed my life forever. If you've ever felt overlooked or doubted, this story is for you. Hit that like button and stay with me till the end, because what happens next will restore your faith in love and second chances. I was sorting through mail on a Tuesday evening when I saw it, a cream-colored envelope with elegant gold lettering. My hands actually shook as I recognized the handwriting. Michael. After 2 years of silence, he was getting married and somehow I was invited. 7 years. That's how long we were together. 7 years of shared dreams, inside jokes, and plans for a future that never came. I remember the day everything fell apart like it was yesterday. He said he needed space, needed to find himself. Apparently, he found himself with Lisa 6 months later. The worst part wasn't the breakup itself. It was realizing I had built my entire identity around being his girlfriend. When he left, I didn't know who I was anymore. My sister Rebecca found me staring at the invitation an hour later, tears streaming down my face. "You're not seriously thinking of going, are you?" she asked, snatching the card from my hands. "Caroline, you need to move on. It's pathetic." Her words stung because deep down, I wondered if she was right. My whole family treated me like damaged goods after the breakup. Poor Caroline, still single at 32. Poor Caroline, who can't seem to find anyone. If only they knew. The secret I'd been keeping felt heavier than ever. 6 months ago, I married Daniel. Not in some grand ceremony my family would have expected, but in a small courthouse with just 2 witnesses. Daniel understood why I wasn't ready to tell anyone yet. My family had a way of making me feel small, and I was terrified they'd find something wrong with him too, just like they did with everything else in my life. Daniel and I met in the most ordinary way, at a coffee shop where we both reached for the same book. He was patient, kind, and saw something in me that I'd forgotten existed. But explaining this to my family felt impossible. How could I tell them I was married when they still treated me like a failure? How could I introduce Daniel to people who made me doubt my own worth? The morning of the wedding arrived faster than I'd expected. I stood in my bedroom, staring at the black dress hanging on my closet door. Safe, respectable, forgettable. Everything I'd trained myself to be. My phone buzzed with a call from Daniel. He was in Seattle for a business conference, unable to come with me even if I'd asked. "You don't have to go," he said gently, his voice warm even through the phone. "No one would blame you for staying home." But I realized I needed to go, not for Michael, not for closure, but for myself. I needed to prove that I was strong enough to face my past without falling apart. I needed to show up as who I am now, not who I used to be, even if that meant going alone. Even if that meant listening to whispers about poor, single Caroline, because I wasn't that person anymore, even if no one else knew it yet. I hung up the phone, put on the black dress, and drove to the church. I had no idea that in a few hours, everything would change. Walking into that church felt like stepping into a time machine. The same stained glass windows, the same wooden pews, the same smell of old hymn books and furniture polish. I'd dreamed of walking down this aisle once, wearing white instead of black. Now I was here as a guest, watching someone else live the life I thought I wanted. The whispers started the moment I walked in. "Is that Caroline? I can't believe she came." Still single, poor thing. I felt their eyes on me like pinpricks, each glance confirming what I already knew. I didn't belong here. I chose a seat in the back, hoping to blend into the shadows, to be invisible. Mrs. Henderson from my old neighborhood spotted me immediately. "Caroline, how lovely to see you, dear. Are you here with someone?" The way she emphasized someone made it clear what she was really asking. I smiled and shook my head, watching her expression shift to that familiar mixture of pity and curiosity. "Well, I'm sure the right man will come along soon," she said, patting my hand like I was a lost puppy. The church was filling up quickly. Friends from college, distant relatives, people who knew me from my Michael days, each face brought back memories I'd tried to bury. Sarah from our college group waved enthusiastically, clearly expecting me to join her in the front. When I gestured to my back row seat, her smile faltered with confusion. Even here I was choosing to hide. Then I saw him, Michael, at the altar, adjusting his tie nervously. He looked different, older maybe, but still the man I'd loved for 7 years. My chest tightened as I remembered our own wedding plans, the venue we'd toured, the dress I'd secretly tried on. For a moment, I wondered what I was doing here. Was this closure or self-torture? The organ music swelled, and Lisa appeared at the back of the church. She was radiant in a way that made my heart ache, not with jealousy, but with a strange kind of happiness. She looked at Michael the way I used to look at him, full of hope and absolute certainty. They deserved this moment, this happiness, and surprisingly, I found myself genuinely glad for them. As the ceremony began, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about what I'd lost, this was about what I'd found. Michael and I had been holding each other back, afraid to grow, afraid to change. Looking at them now, I realized we'd never looked at each other with that kind of pure joy. What we had was comfortable, expected, safe, but it wasn't this kind of love. I touched the simple wedding band hidden beneath my glove, thinking of Daniel. He'd never questioned my need to keep our marriage quiet. He understood my complicated relationship with my family, my tendency to retreat when things got overwhelming. He loved me anyway, completely and without conditions. That was something Michael never quite managed to do. The reception hall buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. I found myself gravitating toward the edges of conversations, offering congratulations when appropriate, helping clear empty plates when no one was looking. It's funny how you can feel most alone in a room full of people who've known you for years. I was refilling the guestbook pen when Rebecca appeared beside me. My sister had that look, the one that meant she was about to say something that would cut deep under the guise of caring. "Caroline, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "This is humiliating. Everyone's talking about how pathetic you look, showing up alone to your ex's wedding." "I wanted to wish them well," I replied quietly, focusing on the pen instead of her face. The truth was more complicated, but Rebecca had never been interested in complicated truths about me. "Wish them well?" she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're 32, Caroline. When are you going to get your life together? When are you going to stop defining yourself by what went wrong and start looking for what could go right?" She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "Mom's worried about you. We all are. You can't keep living like this." Each word felt like a small blade. The worst part was how she delivered them, with the tone of someone who genuinely believed she was helping. This was Rebecca's specialty, making cruelty sound like concern. "I'm fine," I managed to say, though we both knew it sounded weak. "You're fine." She gestured subtly toward Michael and Lisa, now cutting their cake surrounded by joy and celebration. "Look at them. That could have been you if you'd tried harder, if you'd been willing to—" "Stop." The word came out sharper than I intended. Several people nearby turned to look. Rebecca's eyes widened, clearly not expecting me to push back. For a moment, I felt proud of myself, but then the shame crept in, the old familiar shame of making a scene, of not being able to handle family love in its twisted form. "I'm just saying," Rebecca continued, her voice softer now but somehow more cutting, "you need to face reality. You're not getting any younger. Maybe it's time to lower your standards, be more realistic about what you can expect." Lower my standards. Be more realistic. The phrases echoed in my head as she walked away, leaving me standing there with my cheeks burning and my hands shaking. Around me, the celebration continued. Couples dancing, children laughing, families taking photos. Everyone seemed to fit somewhere except me. I watched Michael spin Lisa on the dance floor, both of them glowing with happiness. A year ago, this sight would have destroyed me. Tonight, it mostly made me sad. Not for them, but for the version of myself that had believed I needed to shrink to be loved, that had accepted Rebecca's definition of realistic expectations. I made my way to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe, to remind myself that Rebecca's words said more about her than they did about me. But as I stood in the mirror, touching the ring hidden beneath my glove, I realized something had shifted. I was tired of being invisible, tired of hiding, tired of letting people who claimed to love me make me feel small. I returned to the reception with what I thought was renewed resolve, but the universe had other plans. The bouquet toss was about to begin, and somehow I found myself pushed into the circle of single women. Lisa smiled warmly at me as she turned around, bouquet in hand. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Me, the ex-girlfriend, standing there waiting to catch flowers that symbolized future love. The bouquet flew through the air and landed squarely in my hands. The room erupted in applause and laughter, but it felt hollow, performative. Mrs. Henderson clapped enthusiastically. "See, dear, your time is coming." But I caught the look in some eyes, half pity, half amusement at the cosmic joke of it all. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out. The crowd picked up the chant, and before I knew it, all eyes were on me. My throat closed up. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to be invisible, in the background, unnoticed. Rebecca materialized beside me again, this time with our mother in tow. "Caroline," Mom whispered urgently. "Say something. Don't just stand there." But what could I say? That I was already married? That everything they believed about my life was wrong? The words stuck in my throat. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I could feel people getting restless, confused by my lack of response. Someone laughed nervously. Another person whispered something I couldn't quite hear. The bouquet felt like it weighed 100 pounds in my hands. "Maybe she's waiting for a miracle," Rebecca said loudly, trying to break the tension but somehow making it worse. More laughter, but uncomfortable now. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, that familiar burning sensation of being the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. "I should go," I finally managed to say, handing the bouquet back to Lisa. "Congratulations again, you look beautiful." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too high, too strained. "Caroline, wait," Lisa started, but I was already moving toward the exit. I needed air, I needed space, I needed to be anywhere but here, being looked at with those expressions of pity and confusion. I was almost to the door when I heard Rebecca's voice carry across the room. She was talking to a group of family friends, and while she was trying to be quiet, her voice has always carried. "She's having a harder time with this than we thought. It's just sad, you know? 7 years wasted, and now she can't even handle being at a wedding. Maybe we should have encouraged her not to come." The words hit me like a slap, not because they weren't partly true, but because she was discussing my pain like it was public property, entertainment for the other guests. Everything I felt, the shame, the loneliness, the sense of not belonging anywhere, crystallized into a single clear thought. "I'm done." I pushed through the doors of the reception hall and kept walking. The parking lot felt like freedom, cool air replacing the suffocating warmth of too many people and too many expectations. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my car keys. I would drive home, call Daniel, and forget this day ever happened. Some bridges are better burned, and maybe this was one of them. But as I reached my car, I heard the sound of car doors slamming in the distance. Someone else was arriving late to the reception. I almost didn't turn around, almost drove away and let this day end the way it was supposed to, with me disappearing into the background like I always did. Thank God I looked back. A sleek black car had pulled up to the church entrance. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Even from a distance, I knew that silhouette, the confident way he moved. Daniel, my husband, the man who was supposed to be in Seattle for another 2 days. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating. The stress of the day had finally gotten to me, and my mind was conjuring exactly what I needed most. But then he turned, spotted me across the parking lot, and smiled that warm, knowing smile that had first caught my attention 6 months ago. This was real. He was here. I watched, frozen, as he straightened his tie and walked toward the reception hall with purpose. He moved like someone who belonged, like someone who had every right to be there, the complete opposite of how I'd felt all day. He paused at the entrance, looked back at me still standing by my car, and nodded almost imperceptibly. A silent question. "Are you ready?" I wasn't sure I was ready for anything, but I followed him anyway. The reception hall doors swung open with more force than necessary. The sound cut through the chatter and music like a blade. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Even the band seemed to falter for a moment. Daniel stood in the doorway, scanning the room with calm confidence. His eyes found mine first, and the smile he gave me was so full of love and pride that I felt something shift deep in my chest. Then his gaze moved to the crowd, taking in the shocked faces, the whispered questions, the uncomfortable shuffling. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice carrying easily across the suddenly quiet room. Traffic from the airport was worse than expected. He walked straight toward me, weaving between tables full of wide-eyed guests. Every step seemed deliberate, like he was claiming space that had always been his. Rebecca was the first to recover from the shock. She appeared at my elbow, her eyes fixed on Daniel with the kind of intensity usually reserved for potential threats. "Caroline," she whispered urgently, "who is this? What's going on?" Before I could answer, Daniel had reached us. Up close, he looked even more handsome than usual, the kind of man who turns heads not because he tries to, but because confidence is attractive and he wore his like a second skin. He took my hands in his, and I realized I was trembling. "Hello, beautiful," he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Sorry I couldn't be here for the ceremony. How was it?" "Daniel," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper, "you're supposed to be in Seattle." "The meeting ended early," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face with a gentleness that made my heart ache. "Did you really think I'd miss my wife's ex-boyfriend's wedding?" The word wife dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. I heard Rebecca's sharp intake of breath, the collective gasp from nearby tables, the sudden spike in whispered conversations. But Daniel seemed oblivious to the chaos he'd just created. His attention was entirely on me. "Besides," he continued, his thumb tracing circles on my hand, "I couldn't let you face this alone, not when you've been so worried about it." The room had transformed into something electric with tension and curiosity. People were standing now, craning their necks to get a better look at us. I could practically feel the questions buzzing through the air. "Wife? When? How? Why didn't anyone know?" Michael appeared at our little circle, Lisa beside him, both looking confused but trying to be polite. "Caroline," Michael said carefully, "I don't think we've met your... friend?" "Husband," Daniel corrected smoothly, extending his hand. "Daniel Chen. Congratulations on your wedding. Caroline's told me so much about you." His handshake was firm, confident, the kind that spoke of success and self-assurance. Lisa's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly. "Husband," she echoed, looking between Daniel and me. "Caroline, I had no idea you were married. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell anyone?" Before I could stammer out an explanation, Rebecca inserted herself into the conversation with all the subtlety of a freight train. "This is impossible," she announced, loud enough for at least 3 tables to hear clearly. "Caroline would have told us if she got married. She tells us everything." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. I'd stopped telling my family things years ago, tired of having every decision dissected and found wanting. But Daniel just smiled at Rebecca with the kind of patience usually reserved for difficult children. "Actually, we kept it quiet at Caroline's request," he said, his arm sliding protectively around my waist. "She wanted to make sure it was right before involving family. Smart woman, my wife." The way he said my wife sent warmth flooding through me. Not possessive, but proud, like he couldn't quite believe his luck either. Mom had joined our growing circle now, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. "Caroline Elizabeth," she said, using my full name like she did when I was in trouble as a child, "what is the meaning of this?" "The meaning," Daniel said before I could respond, "is that your daughter is an extraordinary woman who deserves better than to be treated like a failure because she's different from what you expected." The challenge in his voice was gentle but unmistakable. A line drawn in the sand. I'd never had anyone defend me so directly to my family before. The feeling was overwhelming, part relief, part terror, part something I couldn't quite name. "And you are?" Mom asked, her voice carrying that particular chill she reserved for people who had the audacity to call her out. I'm the man who fell in love with Caroline not because she needed rescuing, but because she's brilliant, kind, and stronger than she gives herself credit for, Daniel replied. I'm also the man who married her 6 months ago in a ceremony that suited us perfectly and who couldn't care less about your approval because I already have hers. The crowd around us was growing. I could see phones coming out, people recording this unexpected drama, but Daniel seemed to notice too, and rather than backing down, he did something that took my breath away. He stepped forward, gently taking my hand, and addressed the room. I'm sorry to interrupt the celebration, he said, his voice carrying easily to every corner of the reception hall. But I couldn't stand here and watch people treat my wife as if her worth is diminished because she chose to protect her heart for a while. The room was dead silent now. Even the children seemed to sense that something important was happening. 6 months ago, I met Caroline in a coffee shop, Daniel continued. She was reading a book about building self-confidence, and when I asked her about it, she told me she was trying to become the woman she'd always been inside but never felt brave enough to show the world. That's the woman I fell in love with. He turned to look at me, and I saw nothing but love and pride in his eyes. She thinks I rescued her, he said. But the truth is, she saved me. She taught me that real love isn't about changing someone to fit your expectations. It's about seeing who they really are and loving all of it, the scared parts and the brave parts, the doubts and the dreams. I was crying now, tears flowing freely down my cheeks, not from sadness or embarrassment, but from a kind of relief I'd never experienced. Someone was telling my story accurately, with kindness, with respect. Caroline came here today because she's the kind of person who shows up for people, even when it's hard, Daniel said, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of my family and friends. She came alone because she didn't want to make this day about her relationship. She put your comfort above her own, like she always does. He paused, letting that sink in. What she got in return was judgment about her choices, criticism about her timeline, and comments about her worth based on her relationship status, from people who claim to love her. Rebecca opened her mouth to object, but Daniel held up a gentle hand. I'm not here to attack anyone, he said. I'm here because my wife deserves to be seen for who she is, not who you think she should be. She's accomplished, compassionate, and complete on her own. I didn't make her whole. I just had the incredible fortune of being chosen by someone who was already everything. The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier, more thoughtful. I could see people really looking at me for the first time all day, seeing past their preconceptions to the person I actually was. Now, Daniel said, his tone lighter, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to dance with my wife. We've never danced at a wedding before. Figured it was time. The band, uncertain but game, started playing something slow and romantic. Daniel led me to the dance floor, which cleared around us like we were in our own private bubble. For the first time all day, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. I can't believe you came, I whispered as he pulled me into his arms. I couldn't let you face this alone, he murmured against my ear, and I was tired of hiding. You're my wife, Caroline. I'm proud of that. I want the world to know it. As we swayed together, I became aware of the eyes watching us. But instead of the judgmental stares I'd felt all day, these looks were different. Curious, yes, but also respectful. Admiring even. Several couples had joined us on the dance floor, but we remained the center of attention. Michael and Lisa danced past us, and Michael caught my eye. Congratulations, he mouthed, and I could see genuine happiness there. No jealousy, no regret, just the kindness of someone who had once loved me and was glad to see me loved well. Over Daniel's shoulder I saw Rebecca watching us. Her expression was complicated. Embarrassment, certainly, but also something that might have been understanding. Mom stood beside her, talking quietly with Dad, both of them looking like they were reassessing everything they thought they knew about their daughter. Mrs. Henderson approached the edge of the dance floor and caught my eye. He's lovely, dear, she said warmly. You make a beautiful couple. For the first time all day, I smiled at her comment instead of wincing at it. Thank you, I said. We think so too. As the song ended, Daniel spun me once, then pulled me close for a kiss that was gentle, but unmistakably claiming. Around us, people applauded, and this time it felt genuine. Celebratory. Like they were finally seeing something worth celebrating. The energy in the room had shifted completely. People who had ignored me or pitied me all day were now approaching with curiosity and respect. College friends wanted to know how we met. Distant relatives suddenly remembered how much they'd always liked me. Even some of Michael's family members came over to congratulate us and ask about our plans. But the conversation I was most nervous about came when Rebecca finally approached us. She looked smaller somehow, less certain than she had earlier. "Caroline," she said quietly, "can we talk for a minute?" Daniel squeezed my hand. "I'll get us some drinks," he said, giving Rebecca a polite nod before melting back into the crowd. We stepped slightly aside, into a quieter corner of the room. Rebecca fidgeted with her clutch, clearly struggling with what to say. "I owe you an apology," she finally said. "What I said earlier, about lowering your standards, about being realistic. I was wrong." I waited, not sure how to respond. "Looking at you two together," she continued, "seeing how he looks at you, how he stood up for you, I realize I don't know you as well as I thought I did, and maybe I haven't been the sister I should have been." "Rebecca." "No. Let me finish," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I was so focused on what I thought your life should look like that I couldn't see what it actually looked like. I'm sorry. You deserve better from me." I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot of hurt I'd carried for years beginning to untangle. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." Mom and Dad approached then, and I braced myself for another difficult conversation. But Dad just hugged me, something he rarely did. "We're happy for you, sweetheart," he said. "Wish we could have celebrated with you when it happened." "There's still time for celebration," Daniel said, appearing at my side with perfect timing. "Caroline and I would love to have you all over for dinner next week, if you're interested." The invitation was genuine, warm, but with clear boundaries. Not desperate for approval, not trying to fix years of complicated family dynamics in one evening, just offering connection on equal terms. Michael and Lisa came to say goodbye as the evening wound down. "Thank you for coming," Lisa said, giving me a genuine hug. "It means more than you know." "Your speech earlier," Michael said to Daniel, "about showing up for people even when it's hard, that's exactly who Caroline is. You're lucky to have her." "I remind myself of that every day," Daniel replied with a smile that reached his eyes. As we walked toward the exit, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced since I was a child. Not because everything was suddenly perfect with my family, but because I finally felt seen, recognized, valued for who I actually was instead of judged for who I wasn't. The parking lot was quiet now, just a few guests saying final goodbyes. Daniel and I walked slowly toward our cars, hands intertwined, in no hurry to end this moment. "How did you know?" I asked him. "How did you know I needed you here?" "I always know when you need me," he said simply. "And I could hear it in your voice this morning. You were trying so hard to be brave, but you were also scared. I've felt that way before, trying to prove something to people who should already know your worth." I stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "I'm sorry I kept us a secret for so long. I was ashamed, but not of you. Never of you. I was ashamed of how they made me feel about myself." "I know," he said, cupping my face in his hands. "And I understood why you needed time. But I'm glad that's behind us now. I'm tired of pretending we're not completely crazy about each other." I laughed, feeling giddy with relief. "Completely crazy about each other, huh?" "Absolutely head over heels, sickeningly in love," he confirmed, kissing my nose. "Deal with it." As we drove home in our separate cars, Daniel following me to make sure I was okay, I thought about how this day had started. I'd come here feeling like a failure, someone to be pitied, someone whose life hadn't turned out the way it was supposed to. I was leaving as myself, finally, fully myself. The woman who was loved not in spite of her imperfections, but because of them. The woman who deserved someone willing to drive across the country just to make sure she didn't face her demons alone. The woman who was enough, exactly as she was. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Proud of you today. See you at home." Home. We had a home together, a life together, a love that didn't require me to shrink or hide or apologize for taking up space. For the first time in years, I was excited about tomorrow. Behind me, the church grew smaller in my rearview mirror, along with all the old stories about who I was supposed to be. Ahead of me was home, and the man who saw me clearly from the very beginning. Sometimes the best revenge against people who underestimate you is simply living well. Sometimes the greatest victory is not needing their approval anymore. And sometimes the love story you're meant to live is completely different from the one you thought you wanted. I couldn't wait to see what came next.